Hello, everybody, and welcome into Speaking Steagles, the premier Pennsylvania pro football podcast. I'm Nick Bate. He's Ricardo Martinez Paz. We've got a great week to talk Pennsylvania football. Both the Steelers and Eagles getting victories this week. That's what we love to see. Beating up on the New York football teams as well. So it's a good week. And before we get into just talking about the dominance of these two teams, Ricardo, how you doing this week, my friend?
Hey, I'm doing pretty well, man. Hey, dude, it's a great time for sports. Basketball season just started, although for you, I know it starts post-Christmas, but
yeah. Basketball season doesn't start till Christmas.
exactly. So World Series tomorrow. So yeah, man, it's hockey's back. So it's great, man. How are you doing?
I will say I did watch opening night Knicks versus Celtics. I wish I hadn't, but did watch that. Tuned in, had to see how the new team looked. I'm feeling very optimistic. Just wasn't a great game. So Boston shot lights out. But outside of that, feeling good about the state of the Knicks. Excited for the World Series. Hockey's back. So, yeah, a lot of positive things. But maybe nothing more positive than a Speaking Steagles episode when both the Steelers and Eagles are coming off of wins. And, man, like pretty dominating fashion for both teams, too, beating up on the Jets and the Giants. So, man, I mean, let's just dive right into it. We've had some good football that we can kind of go back and talk about here. Let's start with the Eagles, man. I mean, I feel like this was sort of like the big headline going into this week, the Saquon Barkley revenge game, and the Eagles just kind of stick it to the Giants on the road, just absolutely dominating Big Blue. I mean, what were your initial takeaways from this game? Did it go as expected? And what'd you make of Saquon Barkley's return to New York?
Listen, I expected the Eagles to win. I mean, the Giants are just, not a good team, especially with Daniel Jones there as their QB. So the whole revenge thing, I know he was kind of like, brushing it aside and they're like, no, it's no revenge or whatever, no hard feelings sort of thing. But you could see during the game, like him talking smack and all that, and all the mic'd up moments that kind of came up from it. And he ran all over them like 176, I think it was rushing yards, and then a TD on top of it. So, I could say, it's safe to say he got his revenge on his former team. But geez, man, I really wasn't expecting the score to be the way it was, 28-3. I mean, I thought the Giants would put up somewhat of a fight, but yeah, I mean, it was definitely positive just all around the offense. I mean, Jalen Hurts literally did nothing. He threw for like under 120 yards. So it was just a thrashing, a real thrashing.
Yeah. I got to listen to that Saquon Barkley mic'd up from that game because I've heard it's pretty good. I've yet to actually tune in and hear it. So that's definitely on my list of things to watch. I mean, I feel like you didn't have to watch any further than I think it was maybe even like his first carry, or it was within his first like 5 carries when he was going and just absolutely trucks the Giants defender 5 yards past the line of scrimmage and just keeps going and then like wallops his way into the Giants sideline. Like you knew he was fired up. He was saying the right things, when he was being interviewed about it, but there was definitely a little bit of fire lit under him going into this game. And he definitely led the charge. And frankly, the Giants did not have much of a response at all to, even keep up with the Eagles in the slightest. So that was kind of the next thing I wanted to get to. I mean, I don't know if you have anything else more to add about Saquon Barkley, but I feel like the Eagles defensive line just kind of dominated this game. And part of that, I feel like, is due to the Giants' lackluster offensive line, but really probably the best game we've seen from the Eagles D line.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I mean, 8 sacks. I mean, it's another good showing for them. I mean, against the Browns, they had 5, but clearly the Giants were missing Andrew Thomas, who went down with an injury, and I think he's out for the season, but
he's done for the year. Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely a huge loss for them, but for the Eagles to have, really done what they did, take over the game essentially from the trenches. I mean, I was definitely surprised. I didn't expect 8 sacks for one. I mean, just because it's been a bit inconsistent, but Bryce Huff got a sack, Jalen Carter had 2 sacks. Nakobe Dean had a couple too, so it was kind of just passed around
I feel like
So yeah,
the announcers even made the joke. They're like, everybody's just getting in on it at this point.
yeah, getting in on the fun basically. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's it was yeah, dominant. Um, this is kind of it reminds me of the wins that they had during their Super Bowl season run, where it was like they would just beat up on the bad teams. Little reminiscent of that. I'm not going to say they're anywhere near that level, obviously, but it shows that at least they are capable of doing it. If that makes
Yeah.
sense.
And I mean, like, that's such a big thing for a team that, like, right now, where the Eagles are, like, contending in the division and everything like that, like, you have to be able to beat bad opponents. Like, that's just part of it. If you're going to win a division in the NFL, when you have a bad team on your schedule, you need to be able to take care of business and beat them. I mean, it's as simple as that. And for them to go in on the road against a rival in the Giants and just really suck the life out of the building from the first possession on, really is kind of a testament to, I mean, like, these are the type of games where, like, we were talking about the Eagles first half of the season last year and being like, okay, they're finding ways to win, but like we still haven't seen their best football. And then it never
Yeah,
came, and then they collapsed. And this is where it's like, okay, like they're actually playing dominant football when they are in sort of like another tier above their opponent. And I think that only bodes well kind of going forward. Like, yes, they're going to have bigger challenges than the Giants going forward. But when you can so clearly assert your dominance on a lesser opponent, that's a huge kind of, I guess, sign in just the quality of a team.
yeah, that can definitely boost confidence, build momentum. Uh, I mean, yeah, it's. I mean, you got the Bengals next week. We'll get into, but I mean, yeah, it just it was kind of a get right because you think about it, Jalen Hurts didn't turn the ball over either, and again, he wasn't asked to do very much, but he did what he had to do. I mean, he had that long throw to AJ Brown on 4th and 3, which was crazy, but
Yeah.
I was ripping my hair out like when as it was happening. But they still they essentially took care of business. And this is the kind of level I would hope they can keep up going into the next few games and I guess the remainder of the season. But um, it's just one of those where this team seems a little inconsistent. But I'm gonna there's a lot of positives from this game. I mean, they played better on both sides of the ball and special teams as well. They played more. I feel like they're starting to understand each other a bit more on both
Yeah.
both sides of the ball too. So, and obviously, having AJ Brown back, Devontae Smith, and Lane Johnson's a huge boost on the offensive side. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's certainly something to build off of.
Yeah, and I mean, I was even going to ask you too. I mean, one thing I think you hit on there too is like they're starting to understand each other better, and I think that that's big, especially when like you still consider like the change in coordinators and kind of getting their like footing underneath them a little bit with that kind of like massive change that the team underwent this year. Um,
Yeah.
but like not only that, it's also the fact that you touched on it too. One of the biggest things with this Eagles team, and I don't think it's a trend anymore. I think it's just point blank. Like this team is definitely a level better when AJ Brown is healthy and in the lineup. When
Yeah.
he's out, this offense takes a massive step back. And I think you can, it is, you need all 11 guys on that side of the ball to like contribute, but there's no joke that like he definitely brings this offense up to another gear. And I think that that's kind of just been proven time and time again since he's been a Philadelphia Eagle.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's just, I mean, they have so many weapons, and he's I mean, outside of Saquon, the biggest one. I mean, last season, monster year. He's one of the best receivers in the league, man. Like, there's no other way to put it. It's just the amount of focus and attention he gets from defenses is, I mean, it really does impact the rest of the receiving core.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I that was pretty much everything I had as far as excuse me takeaways for the most part from the game. I'm curious if you had anything else related. We talked about the defense a little bit. I'm curious if there's anything else like special teams, anything else you wanted to kind of touch on from this game and just the Eagles, more recent, kind of action here as well.
Um, I would say, I mean, we've kind of touched on it a little bit, just all of it. I mean, the team seems to be playing a little better. It's just, avoiding the shooting themselves in the foot moments. I mean, not turning the ball over and not committing dumb penalties, which they've gotten better at, I will say. So that's again encouraging. And I know it was against the Browns and the Giants, but like you said, you got to beat the teams that are on your schedule that are in front of you. So that's what the
Yeah.
Eagles are doing at the end of the day. And yeah, again, it's 2 wins in a row. Hopefully to keep building off of it, and we'll see where things go. But overall, they're playing better than the first 3 games of the season.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's the type of thing we talked about this on the last episode. Like, you never want an early bye, but for just the way the Eagles started this season, it honestly kind of came at a perfect time for them to just sort of reset a little bit. And they came back out and they've had 2 victories. And again, you beat the opponents in front of you. And this weekend they really manhandled a division rival, which you kind of never take those rivalry games for granted. You never take those opponents that see you all the time for granted. And on the Giants' home turf, definitely just sucked the life out of that building earlier. So the Giants take care of business. We'll get into their week 8 opponent and matchup in a little bit, but let's flip things over to the Steelers and their week 7 victory, where they kind of walloped the other New York team in the Jets, who came to Pittsburgh. And honestly, the Jets kind of got out to an early lead in this game. They were moving the ball well. And I was even talking with one of my coworkers who's a big Jets fan, and he was feeling really great at the point of the game where Jets were up a score. They were marching down the field, and then Beanie Bishop just came up with a really huge interception, really a nice play to jump in front of the throw. That was kind of the turning point for this offense to then kind of take off. And the Steelers kind of didn't stop there. And the offense didn't look fantastic in the first half, but in the second half, they really turned it on, man. And I got to say, for as much as people were questioning benching Justin Fields, and as much as, I was kind of in the boat of if this doesn't work out, the fan base is going to be ballistic. They brought in Russell Wilson. Tomlin went out on his own, lone wolf, as he said, and made the decision to start Russell Wilson. And honestly, it paid off. And some of the throws that he made were pretty impressive, and he was able to command this offense fairly well. And I think it shows you kind of this is a guy who is, I don't know if it's kind of, clear-cut, done decision, but he's had a borderline Hall of Fame career. He's won a championship in the past, and he's kind of shown you hey, he's still got some gas left in the tank. So I think he just breeds a lot of excitement for what this offense can potentially do going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I need to know the answer to this. How surprised are you that Russell Wilson did kind of as well as he did?
I'm surprised. I expected the first half to be the entire recipe, and it was okay, if they find a way to kind of eke one out, down to the wire, defense comes up with, which, don't get me wrong, the defense played really well too, but kind of a back and forth game, and maybe the Steelers win by 3 points or a touchdown, a 1-score game, and Russell Wilson's not the reason we lost, but he's also not the reason we won. That was kind of what I was expecting.
Yeah.
But he went out there and really left no room for doubt, which is kind of a good sign. I mean, this was the guy that the team went out and that was who they wanted. And that was who that was going to be the quarterback one. And if it wasn't for the calf injuries, that's probably what the case would have been. And I'm pleasantly surprised. I mean, it's good to know, ultimately what the Steelers tried to do this offseason was, improve the quarterback position. And they've clearly done that with the room of Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. This is clearly a step, if not 2 or 3 steps above what they had last year, whether it's Justin Fields in the role that he held for the first 6 weeks, or if it's Russell Wilson now coming out and looking really solid against the Jets.
Yeah, I mean, man, it was just almost a vintage performance in the second half. I mean, it's just the number of sometimes I forget how good his deep ball is, and how his touch to his passes are just it's still there. He still got it. Like you said, still got gas left in the tank. But I mean, it also helps when Najee Harris is kind of finding his groove too. The offensive line maybe a little bit too.
Yeah, I mean, so that was a point I was going to bring up, and I mean, just to wrap up Russell Wilson there too. I think Chris Collinsworth even brought it up on the broadcast. That throw that he had on the Pickens touchdown is a touch throw that we didn't see a lot of from Justin Fields. And that's where you see okay, the deep ball ability, the ability to kind of put some touch on the ball. Even the other throw he had down the left sideline to George Pickens earlier in the game. You see that deep ball ability to kind of pinpoint. I'm not going to lie. Every throw wasn't great. There was the one spectacular catch Pickens made on the right sideline where he was bobbling it and somehow came up with it. Like that ball was underthrown. But for a guy who's making his first start of the season, there's questions about if he's over the hump. Like you see, he still does have gas left in the tank. And it has helped a lot when Najee Harris has really had a nice couple weeks in a row here where he's asserted himself. And a ton of credit has to go to the offensive line. This is a banged up offensive line. Yes. They're down to their fourth string center, as well as a rookie starting at guard who wasn't expected to play much this year. You've got Dan Moore Jr. and Broderick Jones, who, you know, you were expecting Troy Fautanu to be in one of their places for this season. And they've just kind of withstood every injury they've come by. And this offensive line just straight up went out there and dominated the Jets' defensive line. Najee Harris was over 100 yards. Jaylen Warren looked good on the ground. They were just dominating the point of attack, and that was absolutely huge in this game as well.
Yeah, I mean, is the running game starting to heat up? Is Arthur Smith's offense, you know, starting to find its groove? I know it's kind of weird to ask because, you know, Justin Fields was just the quarterback, you know, a week ago, and now it's Russell Wilson. It's almost like there wasn't much of a, what's the word? It was kind of seamless almost.
Yeah, it was seamless, and I think that is a sign of good coaching and good scheme. And I think it's also the fact that, like, this is just a team that's been built to run the football, and that's what they've been trying to accomplish year after year. And they've invested in this offensive line and in the depth of the offensive line that now they're able to kind of assert their will and play the type of football they want. And I really do think we're also seeing the difference in Arthur Smith's coaching compared to what we had in Matt Canada for so many years. And Ricardo, I'm not going to lie, man. My confidence in this team right now is through the roof, scoring 30 points back-to-back weeks against the Jets and Raiders. Like, I'm not going to lie. I think this team can win the division. I don't want to go out on a limb and say that it's like a said done deal or anything, but the Steelers have, you know, been pretty good against the Ravens in recent years in their head-to-head matchups. The Bengals are still going to linger there. And don't get me wrong, the Ravens aren't going to be like a team that they can roll over either. But I see no reason why this team isn't a legitimate division contender.
I mean, right now they're up there with the Ravens. I mean, it does get a little, you know, challenging the second half of the season with, you know, all the division games that they have and the Eagles and Chiefs sprinkled in there too. The Commanders aren't really a pushover either now. So it's definitely going to be kind of a, yeah, I mean, I think it probably goes for all the teams in the AFC North that they're going to have this kind of tough-ish schedule. So, I mean, yeah, I think it's possible too. It's it really does, I guess, come down to the Ravens, which, like you said, I think they've at least split every year the last few. I don't know how many seasons. So
yeah. I mean, and like that's what I think it's going to come down to a lot. The Bengals are going to be in there, man. But like my whole talk at the start of the season was you need to capitalize on the first half of this season when you're going to have the easier portion of your schedule. And, you know, like all things being equal, if they can take care of business against a bad Giants team next week at home, they'll go into the bye 6-2. I couldn't have asked for much better. You could make a case that like they should be going into the bye 8-0 if they can win next week because they had a chance to beat both the Colts and the Cowboys, and it fell short. But if you were to tell me at the start of the year, hey, you're going to go into the bye in week 9 at 8-2, or 6-2, I would have signed up for that immediately. And I mean, when push comes to shove, man, like for as good as the Commanders have kind of become all of a sudden, you're going to have your tough matchups against the Ravens, against the Bengals, and obviously, you know, the Chiefs and Eagles. Like you've also got 2 games against the Browns coming up, which like now look like a much easier opponent as well. So like as far as contending for the division, I feel like everything is going to be kind of in front of them to, I don't want to say control their own destiny, but to a degree, like if you're able to split or win, you know, most of these division games, you're going to have it kind of right in front of you. And I definitely think this is a playoff team here in 2024.
Yeah, no, I think so too. I mean, it's you have the team to do it. This might be the best constructed team they've had since the Big Ben and when they started off undefeated.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I feel like this has been like the general progression of this team really like since we started this podcast back in the 2022 season. Like every year, like the things that they needed to improve upon, they have each offseason or with trades at various points to now. This is kind of like a oiled machine of what was expected. Like they know when they need to invest in new parts now. And honestly, like, yeah, that Big Ben team that, went undefeated through like week 11, I think that was the COVID season. Like this is probably the best team since then. I believe that was the Steelers team that lost to the Browns in the wild card round. This is probably the best team since then. So definitely awesome to see it so far. I mean, the one other thing I kind of wanted to address before we move on to stock up, stock down is just kind of the state of where like the wide receiver room kind of is, because there's a lot of rumors about the Steelers being involved in that. I think they're going to make a move for a wide receiver before the deadline happens. I think this room could use one. I mean, Calvin Austin's been solid. Van Jefferson's been okay. Roman Wilson's been hurt. I think this is a team that could use another wide receiver. I don't know if it has to be, a full-blown superstar the way like they were initially being linked to Devontae Adams before the Jets got him. But I do think it's a room that could benefit from getting another veteran in there.
So I have to ask the question, Cooper Kupp, if it is like, let's say Cooper Kupp, would you be okay with that?
So I was hoping that you were going to ask me my wish list, and I kind of have it in 3 tiers of what I would want. And honestly, I don't know what you're going to have to give up to get Cooper Kupp at this point with the injury history and everything, but I do think he's exactly the type of wide receiver that would complement George Pickens really well. Now, again, if you have to give up too much for Cooper Kupp, my next step down from that would be Adam Thielen if the Panthers were willing to move on from him. I think he's a guy that kind of perfectly encapsulates like sort of like a lesser version of what Cooper Kupp can bring. Can still line up out wide. You can put him in the slot if you need him to a little bit. And I like that's the type of veteran presence I think would be really good for the Steelers wide receiver room. And if it comes down to like a third option, I've heard the rumors with Mike Williams. I don't know if it's a great fit. I feel like he's a little bit of a one-trick pony. I don't think that really moves the needle for me, but just to add another like veteran wide receiver into the room that probably wouldn't cost as much, that would kind of be my third option I wouldn't be as crazy about.
Yeah, I mean, Cooper Kupp would be really interesting, but Adam Thielen, I like that one. That's a veteran, experienced guy that could definitely help that receiver room that's kind of on the younger side anyway. So that would be a
big. And you wouldn't necessarily have to break the bank for him either, which is the nice thing. Compared to Cooper Kupp, it's probably going to be a bit more of a hefty cost, and you're also getting him at this stage of his career where it seems like he's banged up every season, that it's kind of like the risk reward aspect. If you bring me, a veteran Adam Thielen to be just a veteran presence, true number 2 receiver, like that's kind of what I would see as being an ideal fit as far as like cost and like, kind of payout sort of goes. So it'll be interesting to see if they do pull anything off before the trade deadline, because that seems to be the one position that could use, some sort of a boost to it. Wish we could have seen more of Roman Wilson, but he's just been hurt kind of this whole year. Would have been interesting to see what he brings to the table. So definitely a position group we'll keep an eye on. But let's transition into stock up, stock down, and we can go back to the Eagles and your stock up, stock down. I'll let you take it away with that.
All right. Well, I felt this way last episode about putting Saquon. But I'm going to do – I kind of feel similar with A.J. Brown. But I have to put him back because, like I said, he's just so important to this offense and what they do. And like I said, the attention he gets from opposing defenses, it frees up other receivers like Devontae Smith, Jahan Dotson, and others. But, yeah, it's just he has such a huge impact, man. He's just one of the best in the game. And he's coming off, he scored in 2 consecutive games now. So, it's just can't really put it into words how important AJ Brown is to this team. So he definitely deserves one.
I mean, that's like what we said earlier. Like it's clear that this team is on a different level when he's healthy.
Yeah, and I guess I've got 2 defensive players, and you might be surprised by one of them, but I'll start off with Cooper DeJean because I mean. I just the energy he brings, and this quote that Vic Fangio said is that DeJean is a very coachable kid, a very coachable player, which is, I mean, that's awesome for one. Just to know that, he's willing to learn, he's willing to do, he really just cares. He's just a football guy. Like he just wants to improve and get better. And he's just on the field too. He's I bet he's a good tackler, and even excuse me, punt returning.
Yeah.
He's been solid at that too, filling in for Britton Covey. So
Yeah.
he deserves his flowers too, and I think he's fit in pretty well, especially with Quinion Mitchell too alongside. So yeah,
Yeah, dude, I love that. And hey, defenses need some guys who bring the vibe. That's fantastic. So yeah.
and this one will probably surprise you, but I'm gonna throw in Nakobe Dean. I don't know
Yeah.
if you expected that, but
Yeah.
um, he's already had a career high in tackles this season, sacks, and he's exceeding my expectations by a lot. I like genuinely. I mean, he's just. I know he still kind of struggles with, against the pass, sort of, but when it comes to rushing and side to side, he's really just athletic, man. He's really good. He just quick to the point of attack. Like I I'm encouraged to see that he's doing well as a like the first 2 years I couldn't stay on the field and now he's healthy and alongside Zach Bond. So yeah, I'm pleasantly surprised that he's doing as well as he is right now.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. And I feel like this was sort of the Nakobe Dean we've been waiting for since the Eagles drafted him. And
Yeah.
now we're finally kind of getting a glimpse of like, oh, this is where that talent and potential, like he was touted as a first round draft pick coming
Yeah.
out of college and fell to the third round. And now we're seeing some of that potential to a degree because he's been able to stay on the field and get an opportunity. And so much so that the Eagles, parted ways with Devin White recently as well.
Which was surprising, but I mean, he wasn't playing, so it kind of
Yeah.
made sense. And on that side, but could have kept it for depth. But it's all right. It's all right.
All right. Do you have any stock downs or no?
I do have one. It's also
Okay.
on defense. I'm gonna go with Jordan Davis just because I feel like he's been kind of invisible lately. Um, what is year 3 now for him, and the last 5 games he only has 1 sack, 9 tackles. So he's really not even filling up the stat sheet. Not that he has to, but um, I kind of expected him to make more of an impact. I mean, even excuse me, guys like Moro Jomo and Thomas Booker, it it seems like they're making more plays than Jordan Davis. So I'm hoping, I don't know, he's still just trying to adjust to the system, to the scheme that Fangio has, but I don't know, man. I'm not saying he's bad. It's just I kind of expect more from him.
It's frustrating, man. I mean, it's like this. Like I feel like I've been a pretty big Jordan Davis like critic in the sense that I'm not cutting him any slack. Like this was a guy that was drafted in the first round, like expected to be an heir apparent to Fletcher Cox and fill in the gaps when Javon Hargrave left. And
Yeah.
he's just kind of disappointed, and he hasn't developed the way that you'd want a first round pick to develop. And like he came in with all this freak athleticism and high expectations, which you're going to get that as a first round pick. And part of it you can blame on coaching, part of it you can blame on scheme that he hasn't been able to tap into that. But eventually you got to also just look the player in the face and question just like, where is he lacking? Like, is it ability? Is it, just like work ethic? Like, what is it that's kind of missing? And to a degree, like, yeah, like the conversation has to start. Like, was that a mistake of a first round pick?
Yeah. I'm hoping not. I still have some hope for him. It's just it almost feels similar to Kobe Dean where it's like slowly it's like my hope is fading away for this player, but I do really like him. I like his work ethic generally. I mean, his hustle is I mean, is it's really good. It's top notch. It's just I don't know. He's not really quite finding. I mean, he's not quite just making as many plays as I thought. So that's just
Yeah.
that's my only stock down though, which is
Yeah. Yeah.
a
No,
good
and
thing.
it's a valid one. It's a valid one. And we'll turn to the Steelers now. Honestly, coming into this so ridiculously well at all all phases. But as far as my stock up goes, I think it goes without much question. Like Russell Wilson's got to get some love just for how well he kind of stepped in and seamlessly like sort of took hold and took the reins of the offense. So he's kind of my first one, and I feel like we already kind of touched on that. But number two would be like Najee Harris as well, man. Like there's been critics of him at times, like multiple years, but like it's the fact this guy just puts his head down, like goes to work, and the offensive line deserves some love in this category as well. But with what he's kind of doing and really becoming like a bell cow back for the Steelers offense, like he's definitely contributed a lot to the success of the quarterback so far.
Yeah, definitely. And it's now the second 100-yard game in a row. So, I think he's starting to heat up too. The run game, I think, generally is also just improving and finding his groove. So,
and I think it's helpful that the 1-2 punch of him and Jaylen Warren are both healthy. Like, even though Jaylen Warren is not necessarily putting up the numbers, the fact that he can come in and spare him on pass protection downs, and Jaylen Warren can come in and take a couple carries. Like, I think that's also a big thing they complement each other very well. And we've kind of seen that on display here. And, my third kind of stock up, got to give him some love, man. Beanie Bishop, like 2 massive interceptions this week. And honestly, he really hasn't played bad for a position that's very important in the slot cornerback role, and that was kind of up for grabs in training camp. The Steelers really entrusted him as an undrafted free agent, and I feel like he's kind of performed. Like, I don't want to say he's really overexceeded expectations, but he hasn't been a dark spot in the Steelers defense where we have to question, like, man, how are the Steelers going to figure out slot corner? He's definitely held his own there.
Yeah, no, that's cool to see. I mean, just to have another corner, a young corner too. You can see. I mean, it's just nice to see. I mean, I always love the undrafted, free agent stories. It's just like those who make plays, those who make impacts, like straight away with the team. It just makes you wonder, how did other teams not see this? But the fact that the Steelers have them, the Steelers, I mean, Joey Porter Jr. also kind of there in the fold, 2 young guys. I mean, it's just it's cool to see, man.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. And it's very awesome to see. It's that West Virginia-Pittsburgh connection being so close, I guess. So definitely awesome. And then, again, I'm not going to give a stock down this week. I'll just give a little bit more love. Like, the special teams and Danny Smith has been firing on all cylinders this year. They had another blocked kick in this game. And, man, like, that's the type of thing where, like, a good team wins in all 3 phases. Yeah. And the Steelers absolutely did that this week against the Jets. It was all 3 phases were contributing, and like that just continues to go into kind of the reasons why I think this team could contend for a division title.
Yeah, I mean they have the makings of winning the division, like you said. So yeah, all 3 phases clicking, man.
Absolutely. So let's look ahead a little bit we've been talking about kind of the divisions a little bit, and obviously these teams are both going to be in action. Kind of playing rivals from the other divisions, with the Steelers hosting the Giants from the NFC East and the Eagles hosting the Cincinnati Bengals from the AFC North. So let's start there with the Eagles and the Bengals, man. I mean, what are you kind of looking at going into this game? The Bengals starting to kind of find their groove a little bit, but the Eagles also kind of, moving in the right direction themselves and finding their stride as well. I mean, what are some of the aspects you're looking at in this game?
I mean, the first and probably most obvious thing I'll say is you got to keep feeding Saquon. It's just you're doing it so well right now. Like, he's got the hot hand. Obviously, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith will get their touches, but this is a run defense that is bottom half of the league. I believe bottom 10. This defense generally isn't very good. The Bengals I'm speaking of, but so you want to kind of take pressure off of Jalen Hurts, and this is in Cincinnati. You kind of want to take the crowd out of it too by running the football and maybe limiting the number of possessions Joe Burrow gets. Because if anything, the biggest thing I'm worried about is the Bengals offense, because they just have Jamar Chase and they have T. Higgins. They have other playmakers there that kind of scare me, and it's going to be a good test, especially for the defense. But I think it really starts with, giving Saquon his touches and just, letting him do his thing, because it just feels like he breaks off a big run or two, every single game at this point, just because the offensive line is, holding up very well and getting getting push and giving him holes to run through. So I think it
Yeah.
just has to start there from first and foremost.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, it's like it's an interesting matchup because the Bengals are one of those teams where it's like I feel like I still really haven't figured them out of like how legit they are because
Yeah.
they do have such like dynamic skill position players, and Joe Burrow has so much talent at the quarterback position, but it feels like there's aspects of their roster and of their team that can be exploited, and you can sort of find like chinks in the armor, so to speak. So that's definitely the type of thing where it's like, dude, I mean, like you've been saying it on this podcast for years. Like the Eagles need to just run the ball, and like that's just the key recipe for success, man. Like run the ball, like live through Saquon Barkley, live through that offensive line, take the pressure off of Jalen Hurts, where he's not going to be put in situations that he has to air it out and risk turnovers, risk interceptions. Like, let Saquon Barkley kind of do his thing, let the offensive line do his thing, and like you've even seen, like we saw this past week on the 4th and 3, like Jalen Hurts will find the points where he has to air it out and he can get the job done kind of moving the ball.
Yeah, and then the other thing I forgot to say is, Fred Johnson's there out at left tackle, filling in for Mailata, who's on IR right now. And I believe he'll be matched up against Trey Hendrickson. So that, to me, you don't really want him to take over that game. And so that's also part of the reason I think they should run the ball more. And I mean, in passing situations, yes, you should have a tight end there to chip. But yeah, I think the Eagles, I just think, have the advantage, offense versus defense, on at least on that front. Defensively, like I said, it'll be a challenge because Joe Burrow has weapons and playmakers who can pretty much, have a big play, big chunk play, just about any play you can really think of. So it's going to be a really good test. I'm really intrigued. Just Quinion Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Darius Slay against those receivers. So, and the Bengals also just aren't they don't really run the football anyway. So, and when they do, they're not very successful at it. So, I think it really just, they got to be disciplined in the secondary, no like dumb penalties, and hopefully this defensive line kind of stays hot and puts pressure on Joe Burrow, most of the game. But I think it's going to be I honestly think this will be a high scoring game. I like it. It just, to me, that's what it has the makings of. But
yeah, I can see that for sure as well. And I mean, I think that is kind of the matchup that's the most intriguing, is definitely these young Eagles corner, not counting Darius Slay, but the younger Eagles corners and Mitchell and DeJean, to see how they kind of stack up here against what's really going to be a good test for them in a stacked Bengals wide receiver room. It's definitely going to be an interesting matchup to watch. So I think that's where the majority of the eyes are going to kind of be. And yeah, man, I mean, it like I could definitely see this game being one that's a high scoring affair. I guess it kind of also depends on how much the Eagles are really able to kind of control possession, control the clock to keep that down to a degree. Is there a world where you see it being a shootout and like, the Eagles just kind of have to air it out and Jalen Hurts goes for like 250 yards, something like that, and it's kind of just a back and forth affair? Or do you think the Eagles are going to stick to their guns, stick to their game plans primarily, and it's going to be effective?
I mean, I think it can get to that where it has to be like Jalen has to air it out. But do you want me to give a score prediction? Because I don't think it's as high scoring as I'm making it out to be, if that makes sense. But
yeah, sure. We'll get into it. And also, I want to make one thing. Wasn't this game flexed out of a primetime matchup?
I believe it was supposed to be a 4:25 kickoff. If I'm not, it was. And then I got moved to 1. I'm not
positive, but I mean, this is a game that I wish was in a little bit more of a primetime setting, because it is a very intriguing matchup of like two teams that still have like decent expectations and like some serious star power on their rosters that I feel like the NFL could have showcased a little bit more. But what's your score prediction?
So first I'll say the Eagles have never won in Cincinnati. I don't know if that's kind of crazy.
That is crazy.
About, but they've actually only tied there, which was like I think it was like 12 years ago or something like that. So I'm doing the reverse jinx thing, man. I'm going to say 27-24, the Bengals win, but I wouldn't be shocked if the Eagles won this game.
Ricardo's classic reverse jinx. I'm going to go I'm gonna go 32-30. Eagles win.
All right, I like
Each
that.
team
That's high
scores 30
scoring.
points. Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's
that's
give
high.
Jake Elliott a game-winning field goal.
I would love that, man. He used to play there. I mean, he was on the
Yeah.
practice squad there
Yeah,
at
yeah.
Cincy.
Oh,
So
I kind
yeah,
of forgot about that. Yeah.
that'd be cool. Yeah,
Yeah. Before we move on to the Steelers, I also just kind of want to talk about the state of this division. Obviously, Jaden Daniels is dealing with an injury right now, but Washington, a bit more legit than we expected them to be. Dallas, faltering a lot right now, where there's questions about like what's really up with them. The Giants, kind of a laughing stock. Where are you kind of at with the Eagles in this division race?
it's definitely winnable, even with Jaden Daniels. And I mean, he'll be back probably not this week, but he will be probably in the coming weeks. So um, it's still, there's no excuses. Like the Eagles still have the most talent, or and yeah, I'd say in this division, like even more than the Cowboys.
Yeah.
Um, so I I think they can still I think they can win it still, but it really is going to come down to those division games, kind of like it always does, where it's like
Yeah.
you have to at least split with Dallas, and they go to Dallas in a few weeks, so that'll be a really big one to watch. And Commanders are no pushover, and they always, for some reason, we've gone over this, but they always play the Eagles well, and I don't know why that is. Especially now,
Yeah.
I know they will. So
Yeah. They always play the Eagles well, man. Yeah. And I mean, they're definitely not going to be a pushover this year. And it is going to come down to those division games, and it could very well come down to some of those division games against the Commanders. They're going to be there, right? Maybe not in the division. We'll see how they hold up in the division race.
yeah,
I think that also depends on how Philadelphia kind of does against some of their non-division opponents, like
yeah,
the Bengals this week. But I think that Washington team's going to be in playoff conversation right to the bitter end. So,
I think so too. Yeah,
yeah, I don't know. I really, as much as I like the Eagles, man, I really do like the Commanders because I love that Dan Quinn's getting another shot as a head coach. Jaden
yeah,
Daniels is a very fun player to watch. I've
he
always loved
is.
Terry
Yeah,
McLaurin. So, like, it's hard for me to root against that Commanders team. But
yeah, that's
and I
fair.
just love that they have the new ownership in there. They're doing a lot of things right that I commend. So
Yeah,
they remind me to a degree of like when the Mets had Steve Cohen, Mets who I worked for and
yeah,
everything.
yeah.
Like when they had Steve Cohen come in and like take over and the ownership change kind of brought a new culture. Like it feels like that's to a degree what the Commanders are going through.
Yeah.
And it's cool to see because that's what like there shouldn't be bad owners in sports. There's no reason. There's
Yeah.
enough rich people in the world that there don't need to be owners who are cheap with their football teams and make their fans' lives miserable. So I love what the Commanders have kind of done to a degree, but that's enough of that. This isn't talking commies, so or speaking commies. So we'll move on from that. Yeah, so just talking about the Steelers a little bit. Taking on the Giants this week, and I kind of said it before, man. There's no excuse at this point. If you get this win against the Giants, like you set yourself up perfectly for the rest of the season to go into the bye with a ton of momentum and get ready for the back half of the year, which is going to be a challenge to continue to contend in this division. So the Giants are coming into your home turf. And really the biggest thing, man, like I'm looking at the Steelers defensive line, like especially TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith on the outside, like, and Cam Hayward, Keanu Benton on the inside, man, like they're a factor too, but the Giants can't stop the pass rush to save their life. We saw it this week, and there's no reason that whether it's, Daniel Jones or Drew Lock, like that quarterback's life needs to be held. That's where it starts first and foremost. If this defense can just, honestly stick to their game plan, get to the quarterback, just constantly disrupting the pocket, like that alone is going to be enough to get the job done, in my opinion, against this Giants team.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of a. I'm not going to say it's a get right game for the defense, but they've only had 2 sacks in the last 2 games, so I mean, they're still getting pressure. Don't get me wrong about that, but they're not getting to the quarterback quite as much in the last couple of games. So
yeah,
this is kind of a. You could kind
I
of
think
take
get right's a
advantage
fair
of it.
term for it.
You can take advantage of this matchup because it's. I mean, you just saw what the Eagles did, so and the Steelers pass rush is definitely better than the Eagles. So
Yeah. There's no reason that they shouldn't be getting at least 4 to 5 sacks in this game. There's no reason that shouldn't be the bare minimum. The Eagles had 8 last game?
Yes.
Yeah. So there's no reason that the floor shouldn't be 4 or 5. If it's anything more than that, that's going to be the reason that this Giants team stays in the game. Now,
Yeah.
I will say, while we're still talking about the Steelers defense, like matchup I'm really excited to see is Joey Porter Jr. against Malik Neighbors.
Yeah.
Malik Neighbors, excellent rookie wide receiver, ton of fun to watch. Great for the NFL, electric dynamo out there. And Joey Porter Jr. doesn't shy away from these matchups against one number one wide receivers, which I absolutely love about him. Just that chip that he plays on with his shoulder. So I'm going to have my eyes kind of glued to that matchup and seeing how those guys kind of go back and forth. If the Giants quarterback has any time at all to, get the ball out of his hands.
I don't think he will.
Yeah, that's going to be where my eyes are going to kind of be.
Yeah, that's fair.
So that's kind of things with the defense. And then flipping things over to the offense, man, I mean, I think it's just going to be a lot more of the same, where it's going to be like, hey, like pound the rock, like establish the run game, control the time of possession, and like just basically establish the play action, man. That's been, one of the big aspects the Steelers have been able to do well, is just establish the run, establish the play action, and get the ball out. I've really liked the way, too, kind of subtly, and not subtly, this was expected. The way that Arthur Smith has utilized the tight ends has been fantastic this year. Pat Freiermuth's having a really good year. Darnell Washington is really coming into his, I don't want to say coming into his own, but he's really taking that next step. His numbers are already ahead of where he was after a full season last year. Part of that's due to his progression, and I think a big part of that, too, is due to Arthur Smith's system. So something that really hasn't been talked about a lot, at least from us on this podcast, but like that is something that I think is so huge, and I'm really excited to see. Well, I guess I'll just leave it there for now, and then I'll get to my other point on the offense.
Yeah, I mean, dude, Darnell Washington is tough to bring down, man. That's a big man. So I mean, just such a huge target, huge radius. So I mean that's and Pat Freiermuth, having kind of a bounce back sort of season, I guess you could say. And I guess the one thing I will say is don't sleep on the Giants defensive line. Dexter Lawrence, man. I mean, and then they're one of the best pass rushing teams, even though they might not be great on the back end. So just, that's the only thing that worries me about this game is this game could be closer than it should be because of that, I think.
Yeah.
That defensive line.
That's fair. And it's definitely something where it's like, that's where all the pressure is then going to flip to me on the Steelers defense, that like, you cannot let this Giants offense breathe whatsoever. There's nobody outside of Malik Neighbors that should be somebody that's able to kind of take advantage of this defense to a degree and be like kind of somebody that's like popping out. Like if there's any reason, like there's no reason that any of the Giants running backs should be going off in this game. Like the life needs to be sucked out of this Giants offense to the point where, like, yes, if the Giants D line has a good game and kind of bottles up Najee Harris or Jaylen Warren to a degree, like you'll be okay. And I mean, the one other point that I kind of wanted to bring up too is I'm really excited to see, after George Pickens kind of busting out last week, getting his first touchdown of the season, clear connection there with Russell Wilson. I'm excited to see how that kind of progresses into its second week of a combination of that being sort of the dynamic there. So another matchup that I'm going to kind of have my eye on is not so much a matchup, but just like that connection between Russell Wilson and George Pickens going into their second week of work together in the regular season.
Yeah, coming off his best game of the season. So, I mean, that'll be definitely it'll be interesting to see if he can kind of replicate that, or, there's clearly a connection there, like you said. So I kind of expect him to do pretty well again in this game.
Nonetheless, man, there's no excuses. Like, you got to find a way to win this game and go into the bye 6-2. Like, a loss here would be absolutely deflating going into the bye. But if we're kind of transitioning into predictions here, man, I think the Steelers team kind of keeps on rolling. And I think that they have their third straight game scoring 30-plus points. My final score prediction is going to be 33-12. Because I just don't think that we're going to see much from this Giants offense.
Yeah, wow. I mean, I agree with you in terms of, I guess, the point differential. I'd say it's kind of close. My prediction is 23-9. I don't think the Giants are going to score a touchdown. If they do, I don't even know how that would happen. But like, there's no reason they really should be. They've been so bad, man. Like, you can't even score a touchdown at home. Like, What makes me
I know. And dude, I mean, like, it really, like, that offensive line, like, it's crazy to see the difference of, like, the Steelers, who made a conscious effort to rebuild their offensive line and have done it in the last 3 years, to where the point where, like, you can have your fourth string center in there and a rookie guard and have one of your starting tackles out and still be, you know, a very serviceable offensive line. This Giants team has been trying to rebuild this offensive line. It feels like since 2012, and they haven't been able to figure it out. It's mind-boggling. Daniel Jones has never had a good offensive line his whole career there. He's always under pressure. And I mean, again, I'm not making excuses for Daniel Jones, but this offensive line is putrid. Get right game or not, the Steelers defense needs to feast and take advantage of just making the quarterback's life hell in this game. And I think that'll lead to a Steelers lopsided win.
Yeah, they'll do it. They'll be fine. They'll definitely win this game.
Yeah. All right, sounds good, man. Sounds good. Any final thoughts here as we close things out on this week's episode?
No, I just expect good game. Well, your team to win. Eagles, we'll see. I think they can do it though.
It's gonna be an entertaining week. I'm glad that our teams aren't playing at the same time. I'm already looking forward to Sunday, man. We'll be back again soon, breaking down more Steelers and Eagles. Until then, man, peace out, everybody. See you later.